is it tough to convert British beer drinkers to the new craft beer?
Yeah, I sometimes think it's kind of also slightly to do with how you go about doing it. I mean, you have people who... You probably see this a bit more because you have your own pub, so you see directly the customers you're dealing with. We sell directly from the brewery on Saturdays, so a little bit, but most of the time it's somebody else who's serving our beer. So we're slightly further removed from the direct customer, so sometimes it's harder to be able to judge. But actually, it's so some breweries will make a beer that they think is accessible, which I think is a really laudable thing to do, is to make something like a person who maybe drinks normal boring lager would drink this and hopefully enjoy it, but not kind of think too much about what it is that's going on, and then slowly move in this direction towards better beer. But I think the breweries on our sort of scale that are smaller and a little bit, I don't know, that sort of way of doing things doesn't necessarily work, I find, as well as taking somebody and basically giving them something sour. Is I think once somebody realizes that they're not in Kansas anymore, and then the Wizard of Oz isn't going to come and save them, and just kind of there's this, and the reaction may be negative, of course. It's like, you gave me a pint of lemon juice, but I mean, and that's one of the reasons I was asking about how your lacto kind of goes down when you're selling it at the pub, because we're not really, we made some. We tend to, I don't know how old yours is, but ours, we leave 3-4 months, we let it sit, because when it's younger, it does have those baby diaper, those bean flavors, all those aromas that are not necessarily that pleasant. They fade out 3 or 4 months later, so it's fine, it takes a long time. The first time we did that, the batch was gone in 2 weeks, and so suddenly you got another 3 months with no beer. Second batch, it happened that too, and so we're just kind of slightly astonished that there are actually, and especially for sour beer, because that's a different thing, how much that there are people out there who had no idea what sour beer was. Again, what I would like to think is that people, when you're talking about how, say, the English public are appreciating, say, sour beers or new flavors or good beer, I like to think that even if it's something that's completely unrecognizable to their taste buds, if it's a good beer, that's not as long as it's good. The quality they will appreciate.
That's true.
And then
it's difficult I think to appreciate a bad beer.
Yeah, but
if it's good, then you hopefully will know it's good, even if you don't like it.
Exactly.
Very true. Cheers.
And so, cheers. I mean, it's nice, I think, also to I suppose I want to have I do have a lot of faith in people's ability to taste things for themselves. So on our labels and our bottles, there's no information actually, in a sense. It tells you this is an India Pale Ale, it's made with Galaxy hops and it's 7%, and that's basically it. On the back it says this is our address if there's any problems. So there's no tasting notes, there's no there's no marketing, there's no imagery, there's none of this, because basically all we want to say is that this is our beer, try it, what do you think? I'm not going to tell you how this tastes, because you can do this for yourself. So, and I think, actually with that attitude going out and, presenting your beer to people, whether here at a festival or at home or in a bottle or you're in a restaurant or you're in a pub, then once you're opening yourself up to people on this level going, try my beer, what do you think? I'm not going to tell you what it's like, you decide. It's your mouth. Then, as long as you have faith and you've made a good beer that you're happy with, that you appreciate, that other people will also appreciate it too. I think the response has been, at least to our mind, quite positive.
The capacity of the brewery, how big batches and what's the rough yearly production?
So our system is 32 hectoliters, so that's the brew length. Our fermenters are the same size, so we do one batch into one fermenter. We're brewing now maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So when that we work out is about sort of 6,000 hectoliters a year or something like that. This year, that would be, this year will be about 4.5, something like that.
And your biggest market, is it close by, or do you distribute? evenly throughout the UK?
I mean, you find it a lot. I mean, London is almost a different. London is so cosmopolitan, such a big city. You know, there's 10, 12, depending on how you count, so many different millions of people there. It works on a very different level than the rest of the country. I mean, there's a sense in which really large cities have more in common with each other than the country around them. So, in a certain sense, parts of London are more similar to New York, or Copenhagen, or Paris, for example, or Tokyo even, than they are similar to the next county along that's 20 kilometers down the road. Certainly in terms of people's tastes. So, you know, the influence of fashion or food, for example, with American style eating, and beer, obviously, also with wine. These sort of things that influence people move more easily, it seems, between cities. Just because, you know, I'm over here visiting Gothenburg. You know, you might come to London, or we might go into Paris. Well, you know, the communication is there between different cities.
You can still find pretty much the same things.
In a certain sense, yeah. But you kind of, you know, you see it done somewhere else, which in a way can inspire you to, you know. And so part of the reason that I started the brewery is because I went on a trip to New York and I discovered that there were Americans making beer that I didn't even, you know, I'd never heard of or I'd never considered, or beer wasn't even something that was actually that important to me previously. But simply because I'd never been exposed to something that really made me want to care. So, you know, 5 years ago, this happened sort of 6 years ago, and then I came back, I homebrewed, and then, you know, because I wanted that flavor, I wanted that kind of, not just the flavor, but also the attitude towards brewing, you know. It's like somewhere like this, you know, people are here because they care about beer. And every time I'd had beer previously, it was just, this is an excuse for us to sit here and talk. But what we're drinking is really just a bit of alcohol to make us relaxed and have fun, but completely secondary to... I mean, that's one of the joys of an English pub, is that it's the social aspect that is always its primary thing. But you were getting that, and then you were getting Guinness, or, you know, something that was just there in order that you don't get your mouth too dry because you're talking too much.
And now pubs are getting more quieter, I think, because people are sniffing, tasting the beers, and also, instead of talking to each other, using those cell phones with those...
That's progress, that's progress, yeah. There's a future. Soon we won't have to deal with any conversations anymore. It'd be great. No, you think that, and then, you know, you look around and...
It's an easygoing community as well.
Yeah.
Do you read ratings of your own beers?
On occasion, yeah. I mean, I don't. I try. I have a general idea. Yes. On one of the sites, there's a couple of them. I can't keep up with all of them.
If you get.
It's hard to have a relationship with them in a sense. In a certain way, you think over time that something happens in terms of a large amount of people making certain judgments, and you end up with a figure that has some relevance, I suppose. Individually, they can make you really frustrated or really happy, but then again, that's, you know, is that just an ego massage, or is that just like, well, this guy's an idiot, but you know, you have the same experience yourself with your own beers sometimes. You know, I can taste them some days and just go, and then you try the same beer the next day and you go, it's great, and then the next day, it's especially with pale beers, I find. There's something about hops that I find really ephemeral. And it's always like I'm always chasing them.
Sometimes it can taste woody or just sulfury or strange, and the next day it's fantastic. Yeah.
And I always find that and there's a certain kind of... I'm always looking for a certain something in hoppy beers, which actually I very rarely find, even in my own. Even though it can be really enjoyable, but they're still... And it's funny, the dark beers, they seem so much more consistent. They're always there. And in a sense, maybe they get slightly ignored because of this. You know, they're comfortable. You know, they're like a big warm blanket. But when you have one, and I'm always really surprised, actually, that's solid, that's nice. But it's not the thing that excites me, I think, in the same way. But yet it's much more stable and much more...
If you would describe your attitude and your, the way you approach making a beer, what would people find as a thread throughout all the beers from Kernel?
It actually comes, I think, a lot down to how the brewery works, and that's evolving and changing. So I think that there are certain things... mean, there's 9 of us at the brewery. All of us brew. Everybody does bottling, everybody does brewing, everybody looks after the orders, and everybody answers the telephone. So the system works in a way that means it's kind of flat in the sense it's not hierarchical, you know. Which I think is great because it gives whoever, you know, basically, you know, today you'll be brewing, tomorrow will be you, next day will be me or whatever. Everybody has a certain responsibility because they're brewing, they're in charge, you know. They make sure they look after that beer and they make sure they check the temperature the next day, they make sure they dry hop it, they make everything. But that means that actually those sort of, what you were asking about, the kind of threads that link our beers together, they're actually even more amorphous because it's not coming from one place, it's to do with the network of how a group of people work together.
Do you think
and
it's
because
a
of
good
that,
or bad thing?
what?
Do you think it's a good or bad thing? That
Very good.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's amazing. You know, you give somebody that responsibility, I think, and obviously you make sure you're working with the right people. But you know, I enjoy going to work because, well, I like what I do, and I really enjoy the company of the people that I have working with me, and I can trust them all completely, and that's, you know, fundamental, obviously. So you know, if I go away here, I mean, I'm not really worried about anything going wrong. You know, accidents will happen, but you know, I think also when you give people freedom and responsibility and they take that, it makes them much more engaged. It makes them care much more about what they do, and I think it makes the beer better because they're investing everything they have in there. But that means that the thread is not necessarily coming from me directly anymore, you know, in terms of perhaps an ethos and an idea. And yes, the beers will, you know, although they're made by maybe, you know, 9 different people, they'll still very much taste like one of our IPAs will taste like one of our IPAs. But whoever's brewing also has the freedom to kind of go, you know, I want to brew with Chinook today. Okay, it's a Chinook IPA, cool. You know, this is a Galaxy one that we just have here, and you know, tomorrow, who knows? We'll make a Citra. So there is a certain amount of freedom, but at the same time, if you're making an IPA, it's still going to be an IPA. So it's because also in a sense we change the beers we brew every time we make them. So every time we make an IPA, it's a slightly different hop schedule or a slightly different hop variety. But yeah, at the same time, it's still one of our IPAs. So it's kind of the same beer each time, but at the same time, it's not. And that keeps us on our toes because it's nice. I mean, I think I don't know. We've never really brewed a beer consistently to the same recipe all the time. I have a slight inclination, I may be wrong, but that, you know, if you're brewing a beer to a certain recipe with a certain expectation of a certain result, then you have, this is what you can achieve and you're aiming for that. Yeah. And actually that stops you going further in a certain sense sometimes. And I think sometimes if we get a new variety of hop that we never tried before, we make an IPA with one single hop variety, we don't actually have any expectations in a certain sense, but we would like to be able to evaluate that beer as it is. So part of the reason why we do this is try and let SBR stand individually on its own, not comparing it to a template or a measure of how we think it should be. So it just kind of, it's perhaps more an idea of kind of how you view your own beer and how you look at it and how you interpret it.
That sounds like a very sound way to approach brewing and also not get fed up or hit that glass ceiling and just...
It allows that. And the other thing as well is because there's 8 of us brewing, it means that, we're not brewing all the time every day. So, okay, you get a little bit more inconsistency because you don't have the regularity of doing the same rhythm every single day. But it means that nobody is, everybody wants to brew more because, say everybody's brewing once a week or something like this, then it's quite a different thing than if you're brewing every day. But it also prevents, I think it keeps everybody's mind fresh, I think. And again, I think that's part of how we do things. How this affects the beer itself, I mean, it's a very intangible relationship, but I think it works.